Wilhelm Crous is the Managing Director of Knowledge Resources. He joins me to discuss where Kenya, East Africa's biggest economy, is in terms of its human capital development. Wilhelm, thanks for your time. I think we started this discussion by looking at the overall picture in terms of Africa's human capital requirements. And the next stage we agreed was we were going to look at individual countries. So we start off in Kenya today. Let's just give an overview, perhaps, so people understand just where Kenya is. I mean, we know that Africa is short of skills. But how bad is the situation in Kenya?
Kenya has an economically active population in excess of 16 million, of whom 85% are employed in the agricultural sector, which is mainly in the informal sector of Kenya. Then, in addition to that, one of the problems with Kenya's human capital is the fact that they're not creating enough jobs quick enough. Let me give you an example. Over the last few years, only 50,000 jobs were created in the formal sector per annum, whereas the newcomers to the job market increased by 500,000 per annum. Part of the problem, Godfrey, is that the population, the adult population of Kenya, which is now the working population, are fairly unqualified in the sense that 26% of the adult population has no schooling at all. And in total, almost 70% has secondary or less schooling education, and about only 2% has a tertiary education. So if Kenya wants to continue on the growth curve, they will have to invest more in high level and tertiary level human capital.
What's your sense when you look at the situation in Kenya? Do you get the idea that the government is acutely aware of the shortcomings in terms of human strategy development and that they are doing something about it? Is there, in fact, a strategy around it?
Godfrey, Kenya also has a similar type of development plan like South Africa's National Development Plan. And in that specifically, they realize and make the point that Kenya has a tremendous shortage of technicians and artisans, as well as enough qualified people in the scientific and engineering fields. So they have strategies around that. Firstly, they are busy upgrading and establishing a much more high quality TVET system, which is your technical vocational education training system, and the necessary legislation around that. At the same time, they're also working hard at improving the informal artisan and apprenticeship system. So there are enough strategies in place. However, the time lag is quite long, in the sense that it takes you time, quite a long time, to develop high-level human capital. And that's important for Kenya, which is targeting the ICT sector to grow that tremendously, and at the same time, who are trying to modernize the agricultural sector, which is the major employer in the country.
Yeah, so we have all heard about the Savannah Valley, you know, built around the whole Silicon Valley idea, and Kenya has firmly positioned itself as a regional player in terms of the ICT sector. But we do know that they've got competition in Rwanda. They've got a similar focus as well. When you look at Kenya's ICT strategy, does it make sense? Is it effective?
Look, Kenya has distinguished themselves already in that field with, amongst others, M-Pesa, which is being adopted now worldwide as a cutting-edge technology. It's not going to be easy to establish themselves as a world-class ICT center. I think if they focus mostly on providing services and technology for what the late C.K. Prahalad called the bottom of the pyramid, that's where Kenya can take the lead in the world.
But does it have the education system capable of producing the people that would be required to ensure that this strategy is effectively implemented?
Yes, that's the elephant in the room. It'll take, it normally takes almost 20 years from scratch to develop an engineer from birth, so to speak. So time is not on their side. The strategy that I would recommend is that they look at collaborating with international universities, either bringing some of those universities into Kenya, or collaborate with them through online and e-learning systems, provide the necessary education and high-level courses, so that it takes quicker to produce those scientists and engineers.
Yeah, but Wilhelm, are you making a call on the education system?
I'm making a call on the education system. The education system is under pressure. If you look at over the last number of years, the number of people in the primary education system has grown by over 30% over the last 5 years. In secondary, it's over 50%. In tertiary, it's in the 60s. So immediately your quality comes under pressure. And that's where the focus should be now.
So they've got huge problems to deal with. But like most African countries, of course, they are also dealing with a young population. Let's talk about the youth unemployment problem here and strategies of dealing with that.
Well, firstly, the youth unemployment is about 60%, between 35 and 60%, depending on where in the country you're looking at. There are various options that they are looking at. Firstly, to provide a better link between the education system and the world of work, so that the people who are coming out of the education system is better prepared for the world of work. Secondly, they're also looking at increasing, and that's already in place, increasing bursaries and scholarships to students for polytechnics and the TVET education systems. Then also provide better labor market information to the unemployed, so that they can make better choices in terms of jobs.
So we know that one of the problems most African countries face is that the education system does not produce the required skills for the real sector, for the real economy. What's the situation with Kenya? We have seen it in South Africa. How are they faring on that front?
Look, I'm going to focus only on the tertiary education system. And if you look at the number of students coming out of the polytechnics, in the science and technology areas, those numbers have decreased over the last number of years. If you look at University of Nairobi and some of the other universities, that has increased slightly, but not large enough in terms of the requirements for the country. At the same time, we must realize that a part of the solution lies in the diaspora, where one can recruit among the diaspora, bringing them back. And they're more than willing to come back if they can work for typically a multinational and can have challenging jobs and job security.
Yeah, so definitely they've got problems on that front as well. Now, you gave me some very static figures earlier on, where you spoke about the fact that this economy is creating about 50,000 odd jobs or so, and yet at the same time, the number of people that are coming into the job market every year are 500,000. So how does a country then deal with this army of unemployed? Because we've seen this all over the continent, where you've got these thousands of people who are always lining the streets with nothing to do. How does Kenya deal with this?
Godfrey, it's not an easy, there's no easy solution. We're looking at structural problems. So we need to look at solutions that will, over the medium and long term, provide the answers. Short term, it's like a Band-Aid strip. So Dr. Nkosazana Zuma, the other night at a NAPAD function, she made the point that Africa has to invest in high-level human capital. It's engineers that create jobs, for instance. So let's look at Kenya specifically. In providing more opportunities and growing the tourism sector, obviously that will create jobs and can be done over a very short term. The same applies to the agricultural sector. If they modernize and provide value-added services within the agricultural sector, that can also provide many more jobs over quite a number of years, if not months. So there are opportunities, but there needs to be a will as well, and the realization that we cannot just sort of discard those people who are entering the job market, and that they have to look after themselves over the years in terms of providing their own work in the informal sector. It's a ticking time bomb.
Absolutely. You need to improve health system. At the same time, you need to provide a proper governing system for them to be able to participate in the growth of their economies. And if countries do not do that, it is a ticking time bomb, as you say. But now, how do countries that have got problems with their systems in the first place deal with this? As we have said now, Kenya has got a situation with its education system. What about on the health front? Are they doing better in terms of looking after their young people so they're able to maybe introduce them into the workforce better than most other African countries have been able to?
Well, it is, as you said, Godfrey, it's in Africa, it's all over the continent. And as a matter of fact, it's in most developing countries, the same type of problem. We have the situation where the formal sector battles to provide and create job opportunities worldwide.
Yeah.
Kenya will have to develop their manufacturing sector and industrialize more. And they'll have to do it very quickly.
Right.
Because the second machine age is upon us, where robotics and automation and digitization is going to replace millions of jobs, if not already.
What about, let's talk quickly about something else before we let you go, Wilhelm. The other issue is, we have seen, particularly in South Africa, I mean, you mentioned South Africa, people know about labor unrest and all those kind of things. What kind of labor relations framework do they have? Is it better geared towards creating jobs?
The labor relations system in Kenya is also a tripartite system where it's a partnership with government, employers and the trade unions. They are less unionized than South Africa, and we must remember and realize that the formal sector is much smaller than South Africa. When it comes to the labor market flexibility, if you look at their ranking compared to South Africa on the World Competitiveness Report, they rank much higher than South Africa, especially in labor market flexibility and in trust between employer and trade unions. Godfrey, it appears that most of the labor unrest takes place in the public sector. Recently, there's been a teacher strike and in the healthcare, and that's also typically of the African continent. And, outside South Africa, many of the strike and industrial unrest takes place in the public sector. But overall, it's the strike action and the violence that goes along with it in South Africa is much less than in this country. So obviously it's more attractive for foreign investors.
Absolutely. South Africa appears to have a peculiar problem that it will need to deal with, but we've also seen, as you say, these public service strikes in other African countries. Just last week, I think there was a health strike in Zimbabwe where the doctors were on strike demanding higher wages. But for the story of Kenya, we have to leave it there today. Thank you very much, Wilhelm Crous is Managing Director of Knowledge Resources, and we were